To me, I think first we have to start looking at the kind of crisis that we have in front of us and find responses to it, which means governments have to get much more serious, industry has to get much more serious about the actions that need to be taken. The actions will be threefold. One, we will have to do much bigger changes in the way we do business than what we are doing today. It doesn't mean that we reduce our lifestyle, doesn't mean that we get poorer, it just means that we think differently. And the driver for that has to be, one, we have to get governments to give the right indicators, prices for carbon have to go up, we have to get price for water going up so that the flush toilet can be reinvented in large parts of the world. And the third thing is that society has to be educated about the kind of changes that are needed. Tomorrow's world, it has to be different. We have to make sure we can secure it.
Well, that's a good place for me to jump in because I'm worried about the motivation for all of this to happen. Because my generation is not suffering from the carbon up there, wealthy part of the generation. We're using it to go to Sweden and do things like that. So it's going to take a lot of motivation to get the decision makers and the governments to take the sort of steps you're talking about. And I don't know how to do that. I think it's going to take a double campaign from bottom up and from top down so that governments are willing to price the resources appropriately as you're mentioning.
Lloyd, I see changes. I see changes in two ways. One, I see it from my own country. I see that the crisis is reaching such a head that poor communities, particularly people who are suffering today, they are out there on the streets saying enough is enough. And this to me is not, it's a positive driver to make, and we have to understand why they're out on the streets. If we can do that, then our governments, my government will say, yes, we'll do things differently. So on one hand, you will get protest to make the change. On the other hand, you will get positive action. And positive action I see from young people. I see a lot of young people today not with the cobwebs in their minds as all of us had. Actually a willingness to think differently, a value system that is very different from the generation that we belong to. And I think I'm not so pessimistic.
Well, I'm much older than you, and I've seen one generation after another say it's the young people that's going to save us from this. And you mentioned the poor people, and that's the tragedy of climate change. If every time I release some carbon dioxide, I got a mild electric shock or some sort of feedback, I'd take action. But the way it works, as you know, the poor suffer the most, and the people farthest away from those causing the problem. And so we need to, as you and I discussed during the Commission on Climate Change and Development, we need to empower the poor to take charge of their own lives and to have more political voice so that they can play a role in solving the problem.
But is this a blame game?
No, I'm not. I'm blaming everyone in the sense that the richer countries are causing the problem and the poor are being most affected by it. But it is all of us, and the scariest stuff being written is being written by the philosophers who say that if you look at the nature of climate change, you see why we don't have the motivation to solve it, but it corrupts us. So we pretend that we're making progress. We pretend we're seriously negotiating, and in fact, we're not making all that much progress. Every year since we signed the treaty, we've emitted more carbon.
There's no way you can disagree with Lloyd on that. It is absolutely the fact of today. I mean, it is true that society is looking for small answers. It is true also that society would like to fool itself that it has found solutions when it really hasn't. I mean, look at the most ridiculous solution which is on the table today, that we will take the carbon dioxide that we emit and then we will bury it underground and we will just think that it is forgotten. Clearly that's not a solution that will change tomorrow. But to me, and this is where, my sense, Lloyd, is I agree with you. And you and I share that sense of the crisis, that sense of panic. And I have that sense of panic about how can we make sure that we can make that change. To me, the only way for the future really is that as the crisis grows, and in my country I see as the crisis grows, and if we can get more and more democracy to remain, more and more people who can be engaged in the process of both understanding the issue and being part of the the changes. I mean, we have to make sure that our media doesn't become corporatized. We have to make sure that our governments don't have a corporate takeover. We have to make sure that our judiciaries remain independent. If we can have democracy functioning in our countries, then as the crisis grows, societies will be forced to find answers. The problem today is that we have local democracy, perhaps. We can have national democracy, but how do we have global democracy?
Exactly. And how do we get business and civil society and governments all working together and not standing apart? But if you're looking for signs of hope, 29 companies recently looked for what a sustainable world might look like. And what they really found out was how disastrous business as usual is going to be.
Fascinating.
As one young executive said, we're going to kill our grandchildren. And so I think once business looks, they get it. Then they don't know quite what to do, but they are becoming more politicized about this and becoming more statesmanlike in terms of calling on governments to set up the right framework conditions.
I am not surprised at all, and I think that's the way for the future. I think that is really where businesses, as they understand the challenge, will find answers, because businesses are connected to society. I'll give you my most favorite example. We were studying paper mills in India, and we found one paper mill had put up an odor control system, a system to control smell. And we have no regulation for smell. So, my question was, why did they do this? I mean, most companies do the minimum of what government asks. Why did this company do so? Why? Because this is a company located next to a local jail, and the inmates of the jail took the company to court and won.
Wonderful.
So, this is really, to me, where the change is going to come. And business understands that their most important community is the community that lives around them.
Right.
They understand that they have to be able to make sure that they can improve their products. They have to secure the future of people. I think it is that long-term understanding that we have to also work with businesses, connect them to societies, and make sure governments don't get compromised. To me, that's the only way to the future.
And that's the hope of younger people, because the younger people are getting so good at working in politics, in business, and in civil society, and can go either way.
Absolutely. I think we have some answers.
I think we do.